And that's how much you can fit in a 10-foot dumpster. What's going on, everybody? This is the Cover Band Confidential Podcast, the podcast for cover band musicians and band leaders to learn how to rock more and suck less. In Atlanta, Georgia, I'm Adam Johnson.
In Greensboro, North Carolina, I am Dan Ray.
I've been talking on and off the show about the hardwood floor situation in our house, and that actually happened this past week.
Cool.
And we've been spending lots of times doing other projects because, you know, it's like football. It's like a momentum thing. But you get it going, you got to kind of keep it moving if you want to stay on top of it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And one thing leads to another.
Mm-hmm.
You end up, you know, having to now the floor looks great, but the walls look like crap. And so we got to fix that. And then the ceiling needs paint. And so we deal with what it takes to paint a ceiling, which is a whole thing.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. We're doing trim and doors.
Yeah.
We did all the doorknobs, all the hinges.
Got to do the knobs,
black
knobs and hinges.
Yep.
It's critical. Yep.
Yeah. It's like Bob Vila over here.
There you go. I will admit, I am
a
big fan of this old house. The current iteration of it is great, just as great as the old ones.
Solid lineup.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
It is good stuff. Well, how are you doing, man?
You know, I'm good. I did a live acoustic karaoke last night that was super fun. Back at the Pig Pounder. You know, we started out the night with the room was pretty full, and some of my regulars were there. And before long, my regulars owned the place, and it was a real solid turnout of my regular following, really solid.
Nice.
Which is great to see. It's partially because it's such a little community, you know, like all these people that I know met because they came to my shows, and I found them all at different venues in different places, but suddenly they're all friends, and it's like it's great. It's really great. They all cheer for each other singing and super into it all over the place. I tried a new thing setup wise last night. Stage,
yeah, you were mentioning.
Yeah, stage setup wise, which is historically I've always just set up two mics together facing whatever the audience position is going to be. In some rooms you have to figure it out, but to kind of me and the person, and we're both facing forward last night. And part of it is I'm trying to stay off my feet while I perform. So I stole a stool from the bar, and I set up sort of kitty corner of main stage space. And I now have wireless, the Fenix wireless 2-pack that I bought, which continues to be absolutely rock solid. But so I hand one of those to the singer, and they own the central part of the stage. And then I was off to the side, kind of angled in so I could see them and they could see me, and we could have eye contact while we performed. But it was the way the stage was set up. It was clear it wasn't the dance show. It was karaoke. It was about them. I really liked it. I liked it a lot. I liked being able to interact with my singer while they did. And I think they liked that too. Better than having to turn away from the audience to do that. I was just kind of right there in their peripherals. Yeah, I think that's how I'm going to do it from now on when I have space for it, because it was a really good way to set it up. So
nice.
Yeah.
So you had been talking about kind of your systems around the karaoke thing, and one thing I forgot to bring up on the last episode was one of the things that I had been working on besides the light rig was this floor monitor setup for lyrics and such. So I found this Instructables article, and in just a heads up, my intent is to make like a full video about this and kind of talk about all the pieces and parts. But I found this Instructable where this person had taken a vertically oriented stage monitor and put a display in it sideways. And we had a couple of gigs. The first 90s gig that we did had a photographer, and we had all these pictures taken, and some of them were incredible. In two shots in particular, Amber is doing something that looks so badass.
It's so good.
But the downside is that there is an iPad just in the middle of the shot.
Right.
And so luckily, the community around us is immensely talented. And I asked somebody in the Patreon, hey, could you take the iPads out of this? And they sure as hell did. And it looks amazing.
Yeah.
But in the moment, I was like, there's got to be a better way to do this.
Yes.
So I really fell down a rabbit hole and found this specific monitor that is all wood construction, super sturdy, but could fit a LED display vertically. And I wrote down the model number, and then I put it into Craigslist, and there was one result in that whole search, and it was a broken one, which is incredible.
Perfect.
Like, what are the odds?
Perfect.
So I immediately, sent an email to that person And I immediately get a DM back on Instagram going, "Hey, it's Justin, the guy with the Craigslist ad."
Huh.
And it turns out it's a guy who plays in a group that I subbed for.
Ah.
And so like it was fate, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I told him, I was like, "Dude, like you have no idea." He's like, "No, you can like fix those." Like, no, no, no. This is actually perfect because this is what I'm going to do.
I'm gonna gut
He's
it,
like,
so it doesn't need to
yeah.
work. Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was just a cool, first off, I mean, the fact that you found the one thing you need and it's exactly what you need. And it's from a person that you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it was totally meant to be. The real challenge was actually finding a monitor that fit because it's a 20-inch opening, finding a 20-inch monitor that fits in that spot because it has to be
Well,
perfectly 20 inches wide. And so you
right,
can't do
right,
it from
and
the screen size because
monitors
that's
are measured in
diagonal.
diagonal. Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. So I had a couple laying around. None of them worked. I ended up finding one. My office, they were clearing a bunch of stuff out, and I found one monitor, and it fits. But I technically need to go in and kind of cut around where the speaker opening is because the cabling is right in the center of that display. And so in order for it to fit right, it kind of has to be off center slightly because of where the circle kind of
Yeah.
juts out.
Yeah. Surely you can hack that though.
And I've done a bunch of hacking. I pulled the access point out, like where the plugs are, and ground out a hole big enough to put the IEC cable. Like it's coming along.
Good.
And we did run it on a test trial, and it worked perfectly. So it was paired up with Band Helper, and I was using the air turn switch to move the lyrics up and down.
Yeah.
Like it was
Awesome.
perfect. And so now the next thing to do is to do for the live band karaoke where we already have the slides. I have to reformat them to this new way. And the big challenge really is to get the display output from your device to show twisted 90 degrees in Band Helper.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a trick to that, and I had to do a fair amount of research. But I found one video that showed how to do the first part, and I found another video that showed how to do the second part. So I'm going to make one video that
combines the parts. That's
Yep.
good. That's good. Now, listen, speaking of DIYing stuff, well, before I get to that, do you have any concern, just as I think about this Franken device you've created, about transporting it with like a screen loose at the end of, I mean, attached, but there it is. Like how
Yeah, so
yeah.
it's not attached. So that's the first thing.
Okay.
So right now it's currently just like laying in that spot. Now there are companies that make these for this purpose, and they all typically have some sort of like latching cover that protects the screen.
Yeah.
But in my case, all I have to do is unplug it and turn it over, and the LCD display is against.
I see. Yeah, so you expose the back of the screen as you transport it.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about it. I know you are a 3D printer guy. I'm shopping them myself. And I've been thinking a lot about music doodads, things that would help organization or management of cables, for instance, or there's like a lot of tools and things like that are out there to be printed if you are in a fully DIY, manufacture it yourself kind of mode around these things.
Yep.
So I was thinking about, like, could you print one of those screen covers?
Oh yeah, I mean, you definitely could.
Yeah.
This is in-ear stand that I printed.
Yes.
I use that when we're broadcasting and such.
There you go.
But yeah, it's it's still got to be worked through. There's a couple of things I need to figure out, but on its face, it's successful. What I really come to realize is that I'm running out of space, because if I'm bringing front of house and I'm bringing lights and I'm bringing all of this other, like, our Suburban is full.
Right.
Like when you can fill a Suburban with like that, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's good work.
So I'm trying to come up with solutions to downsize some of our gear, because right now our front of house is a 16 space rolling rack. It's heavy. It's particularly miserable to move around. I've been toying with splitting it up, and I feel like we're just about there.
Yeah.
And then I'll just pull the trigger and get probably 4 space racks, because there's a few of them that are like, one's a drawer, like that's 2 spaces you can just throw right out. So I think we can get it down to 8 spaces between 2 racks. And then my Pelican is this massive, I think it's the 0305. It's a big cube, and it's again, you can't carry it with two hands. It takes two people.
Yeah.
So finding ways to kind of downsize and make things a bit leaner.
Yeah.
In our travel rig.
That's
So
good.
that's all a part of the plan.
That's important. You'd separate it into like mixer and in-ears.
Yeah, I think it would be like inputs and then like RF.
Yeah.
So microphones and in-ears, splitting the outputs and that.
Yeah.
That's
I like
the
the
idea.
fact that a lot of racks are quote unquote full depth, and then a lot of the gear is shallower than that, and there's room in the back of the
Right.
rack for, those cables that plug into the mains that then need to get, extended with other cables to get to the speakers, but the essential jack setup is set. I would say my main cables live coiled up in the back of my rack case.
Yeah.
Right. And I just drag them to the speakers wherever they are. It's pretty handy.
Yeah. You want to fall down a rabbit hole. The playback and fly rig communities online are just like
Yeah.
so amazing.
Yeah.
It's so expensive.
Yeah.
It looks so cool. Savant Playback is an account I follow on Instagram. Their stuff looks incredible. They specialize in these kind of modular flight racks. BTPA is another one. They're kind of like the main name in that world. But man, you want to talk about like just like clean setups? Ugh,
the cable
so
management,
good.
like
so good.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Multi-pin everything.
Right.
Yeah, everything is in its own place and it's like perfectly labeled. It's a dream. It's a dream.
It's a dream.
So while we're on the topic of gear, I did want to mention something about this recent purchase I made, the Line 6 Catalyst amp. It was a total impulse buy. It was one of those things where it's like, I really just want to have something that I can just have laying around and just play when I feel like I've got a chance to, and found a good priced one at a pawn shop. Updated the firmware because the old ones now do what the new ones do, and I have really enjoyed using this amp. And this past week, I found out it did something that I had no idea that it did, and it actually makes it even more compelling, in my opinion. So as I was trying to figure out ways to adjust the amp, because the way that it works is that some of the adjustments can be done via the knobs on the top of the amp, but there's also a companion application that, you can connect via USB. And I was like, it's cool that you can plug it into a laptop. That's not always practical. So I look online and it turns out that they have an iOS app. I'm like, oh, well, how do you connect it? And it's the same thing. You have to connect it via USB. I was like, oh, well, that kind of sucks. One thing I had failed to realize was that I got a new phone. I got an iPhone 15 Pro about a month ago, and it's got a USB-C port on the bottom.
Right.
And I was like, I wonder if I can use the laptop adapter that I use for my main computer and plug it into that USB. I wonder if that would work. And so I tried it, and sure enough, it does work. So then I had it set up where like the amp was plugged into my phone, and my phone was on a stand, and I could dial in stuff while I was playing. And then I had another idea. I was like, well, okay, if it sees it as a USB device, I wonder if it sees it as an interface.
Yeah.
So I fire up my camera app and just press record on that and was playing around. And sure enough, it recorded the direct signal out of the back of the amp right into my phone.
Okay.
And I love that because it doesn't affect the output of the speaker. So that means that I can sit in the room and hear what I'm doing without putting a pair of headphones on and get a really nice direct out signal for other purposes, for content purposes and that kind of thing. Like total game changer.
That's good.
And the fact that the other thing I like about it is that it's because it's solid state, I never turn it off. So right behind me is that pink Schecter literally just sitting on top of the amp. And any time I have like 2.5 minutes, I can literally just turn around, pick it up, and it's just like, it's making noise.
That's great.
It's fantastic. So if you were on the fence or you weren't on the fence, you weren't even considering it, I got that 60-watt Catalyst amp for less than $150. It is well worth that and then some. It is fantastic. You should absolutely look into it.
Cool.
You know what else you should look into?
Tell me.
This week's review.
Oh, good call.
And we got a fresh one. Literally, as we were hitting record on this on Sunday, got a notification. And this one came in, and I can't I don't know how to pronounce this. Dezoich is the username on Apple Podcasts. This is a 5-star review. Says prime cover band resource and entertaining. Not we're not just pretty faces over here.
Right.
We're actually, I guess we're not
even
smart faces.
We're not even pretty faces.
We're smart faces who happen to be pretty faces. I think
Okay.
that's what they're trying to say.
I like it.
As a first-time leader of a cover band, their name is Rogue Elements. They're out of Houston, Texas.
Nice.
This podcast is full of amazing wisdom. It's like Adam and Dan made all of the mistakes so that I don't have to.
That's accurate.
That is,
Yeah.
that's part and parcel. That's
Yeah.
what
That's why
we
we're
say it's
here.
about.
That's why we're here.
There's gear talk plus tales from Adam and Dan's latest shows, but the best part of the show is the in-depth review of practical topics relevant to leading and being part of a cover band. I especially like the show on Setlist-ology.
Ooh, how about that?
Yeah, the art and science of creating a great set list. Looking forward to many more great tips and fun episodes from these guys as I grow my own band.
Very good.
So big thanks to Dezoich. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah.
And if you want to hear me try and struggle to pronounce your name, leave a review.
Yeah.
That's all you got to do.
Yeah. Yeah. How about that? Mentioning set list details as a topic.
Yes, because there were a couple of things we wanted to talk about. This one definitely is going to be the main thrust of the conversation, but I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge some of the big news that's happened over the past week. The main one being for guys in our, age range, Oasis declaring their reunion and had all these shows put up. And I'll be dipped if a couple of guys in the Patreon didn't get tickets to go see those shows at Wembley.
Yeah.
Which has got to be insane. Big shout out to Jonathan there in Louisiana. Because he came up to Atlanta to see the Marvelous 3 reunion, that big run of shows that happened right around this time last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's got tickets to go see him at Wembley. It's going to be incredible.
Very cool.
Now, as a result of that, though, there's been a lot of chatter about the stuff that we do. Primarily the fact that all of these Oasis tribute bands are really having a hell of a moment.
Yeah. Yeah, they're getting booked hard.
And it's like, I've gotten multiple news stories about different Oasis tribute bands. It's not all the same ones. They're all over the place. And literally the day after they announced that reunion, all of my cover band news is just Oasis tribute band, super busy. Oasis tribute band really demands insane. And yeah, it's crazy to think about, that if you're a part of any kind of tribute, that something could happen and all of a sudden, like, your dance card is immediately full. And that seems to be what's happening.
Yeah. And I mean, it really is true that a reunion is maybe the happiest event that could take place. I mean, a death is probably the next most common one. Oh, well, probably far more common actually, but
yeah, fair.
Thing that's going to impact you is somebody in the band that you're tributing leaves the world, and it brings attention to the band, and you find yourself working. Yeah.
It's kind of a mixed blessing.
For sure.
Is what you would.
Yeah. Don't mean to be a bummer.
None of that here.
Yeah. No.
This is all good stuff.
No.
It's
Now, listen,
exciting.
I do know that some people are betting on how many dates they'll actually do, how long the reunion will last, that sort of thing. It's been a pretty contentious situation with those guys, but boy, there are a ton of Oasis tribute acts. As I look at them, not all that creative names. A lot of them are Oasis spelled in different ways with different numbers of S's and I's and U's and
Oasis. That's a pretty big one.
Yeah, Oasis, Oassis is one. Oasis with a U,
like sus,
like
suspicious.
Yeah, and then there's some that are a little more clever. Definitely might be, definitely could be.
I love that. Because there's definitely there's a tribute band most definitely called Definitely Maybe.
Yes.
But then there's other tribute bands that are definitely might be,
definitely could
be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'd love you have to have those conversations. Someone's like, oh, we love you guys. It's like, well, did you see Definitely Maybe or Definitely Might Be?
Yeah. Definitely should be.
We don't like that. We don't get along with those guys.
Definitely ought to be. We're all fighting because Liam and Noel are so.
It's true.
All the rest of us are.
And it is interesting though. They opted to go the Black Crowes route, which again, another pair of famous fighting brothers,
For sure.
where they're not reuniting the band. It's just those guys,
Yeah.
and then High Flying Birds is is going to be the backing band for that whole operation.
Right.
They're not bringing the original guys, just the the ones that can make the most money off of it.
Yeah, the ones who matter.
Good for them.
Sure.
I hope they sell a gajillion tickets, and I hope that they they've got couples counseling and it all goes well.
Look, I mean, they always put on a
But
great
listen,
show, so I
sure,
imagine
but
they will
like
continue to.
But the only thing that could be better for an Oasis tribute band besides them reuniting is them stopping touring again because they can't stand each other. So,
Yeah.
I mean, those guys are pretty much in a win-win situation.
It's true.
Either way,
Yeah, it's true.
demand's up.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's all good if you're an
yeah,
Oasis
more power to
tribute,
you guys for sure.
whether you're definitely
right.
or not.
Agreed. So let's talk about the thing we are going to talk about then.
Here we go.
So this was a topic that came up in the Patreon Slack. Again, that's where all of the action is happening. Great questions asked all the time. This one drew particular attention, and so we figured it was worth getting out to the general population to see what you guys think about this. And the general question is around set lists, so that's kind of why we were alluding to that
Right.
from that review reference. And the idea is, we talk a lot about energy and flow and that kind of thing, but we don't always talk about the
This one's not about
logistics.
content. This one's not about content. It's about timing, which is a really interesting aspect of what's important in building a set list.
So depending on the way that you structure your show, there are folks out there that are doing single 4-hour sets, and that's what they're doing.
Yep.
Most of us are breaking them up into smaller bits. Our normal go-to is 275s.
Mm-hmm.
That's our normal, if we're doing 2 sets, we'll be playing about 2.5 hours worth of whatever. But what does that look like? Well, first off, what does 2 hours and 30 minutes of music look like? But what does that look like as far as breaking it up into 2 sets?
Yeah.
And how do you account for things and all of the other kind of
and how detailed
detail
is your planning around those sets? That was really a question. And some Patreon members showed their spreadsheet where they have rigorously recorded the amount of time each track takes, and usually there are bands that are working with tracks, so it's finite. It's not variable based on how much adrenaline the band is having that night.
Right.
Which for those of us who don't work on tracks really means that songs can vary a lot, but if you have it locked in, you can really dial in exactly this duration for a set. And so the question is, do you do that, or do you wing it, or do you build out a set list that's close, or what's your play?
And it's interesting because there was no singular answer. There was no monolith to this whole situation, because there were people that were very regimented, and the songs are precise. The breaks are precise. The content that is covered during those breaks is all laid out ahead of time. It is very regimented. It is very specific. And it's one of those operations where everything's accounted for. And you start and it just goes from one thing to the next, and it's very precise and quick.
Yep.
That is not what I do. Is that what you do?
No. What do you do?
So our general idea is to kind of come within 5 minutes of the target as just kind of a general thing. So much like Dan alluded to, my band plays to tracks. And so we know pretty much what every song is. And if you use a service like Band Helper, you can put the duration in, even if it's just a guesstimate. And for what it's worth, Band Helper also can do that. You can say, hey, just on average, every song's 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
We'll get into that when we talk about my process.
So typically the way that I look at something is we will do set 1, and again, within 5 minutes, set 2, probably, it might be a little bit shorter. And the only reason why it's shorter is because we'll also have like a stack of back pocket songs. So we'll have 5 tunes that aren't technically in the set list, but are there to drop at a moment's notice.
Yep. And
typically, if any set is going to get cut down or run short, it's going to be the second set because of all the other stuff that's going on at whatever your event you're doing. So within 5 or 10 minutes is the target, with 5 or so alternate audible songs to kind of pull out just in case. That's
Yep.
our move.
Yep.
And there'll be marks for breaks. Typically, we've got our show broken up into chunks, like where one song goes into the next and that kind of thing. And there might be a tuning break, or might be put a guitar down, pick a guitar up.
Mhm.
So that's typically, we'll probably account for 3 to 4 stops in a single set, and those might be mapped, or they may just kind of be out in the breeze.
Yeah.
All right, how about you?
So my current project does not use tracks, and how I manage time on them is, with some exceptions, I set a default duration in Band Helper of about 3
Okay.
minutes, and just say the average song is 3 minutes. Now there are some, I take our medleys and I put them all together in one quote unquote song in Band Helper, so it moves all in a
Okay.
piece. I can lay out how the transitions work, especially when it's come to broadcasting my screen to the other
Mhm.
Band Helper screens in the room. That's really helpful, because people can just walk right through it. They don't have to worry about changing songs in the middle of a medley. It's just all
Yeah.
in one document. So those ones I go in and put in a specific duration to, or any others that I know are exceptionally long or exceptionally short. Song 2 is like 90 seconds long.
Yeah.
So I use the default, except where I know that the default doesn't work. And then when I'm building a set list for a 3-hour show, we'll typically do it in 2 sets. And I like the first set to be longer and the second to be shorter but higher energy. And in both cases, I will oversubscribe those sets. Like when you get going onto a plane and they're like, we've oversold this plane because we couldn't count how many seats there were and we screwed up and sold too many tickets. That's not what they're doing. They're hedging their bets
Yeah.
that some people aren't going to show up. Right. And so that's not quite what I'm doing when I'm building a set list, but it's kind of like that. I know that I'm overbooking the set because there are songs that in the moment I'm not going to feel. The room's not right for them. I'm going to push them off for later, or maybe won't do them. I know there are going to be some that I will skip, and that's fine. We're going to call an audible, skip ahead. Especially, as you said, in the second set, we get a little compressed for time coming up on the end of the night and looking at what's left, and we're just not going to get it all in. So let's jump ahead to something, which means that I've got my typical closers. We close with a whole series of big bangers on purpose. And before that, I put in the songs that are a little more optional. They're still the right energy for a second set, but if we don't do them, it's not going to hurt my feelings.
Right.
And then I have a set that I call extras, and you can configure Band Helper to say that the songs in this one don't contribute to the total duration.
Time.
They're not part of the time of the show. And I'll put callable audibles into that. And so the show will include those if it's right, if the room wants them. You got to stay. The problem with a really rigorous and locked in set list is that it limits your ability to dance with the room. And for me, that's really important. So I like that you've found a middle ground about that. My show's all middle ground. It's like, the next song is open for debate. I mean, I set myself a plan, but no plan survives first contact with the enemy. It's fine. So that's my deal. I set up the set list to be deliberately with skippable things in them, and things that might surprise me that I want to skip when I get there. That's also okay.
Yeah.
And then I set up a set that are extras that I can call to if they're the right song for the room.
Yeah. There were some really interesting resources that people contributed in the conversation. Got to shout out Adam Moskowitz. He's one of those people that like everything is very, very precise.
Yes.
So he's got a formula for the number of songs that they choose for the period of time that they're playing.
Yeah.
And it's everything from 15 minutes to 4 hours. And it's very precise. So in my case where I was talking about 275s, he's saying that's 35 songs just off the dome, which sounds about right. Cause it's like 17 per set is about what we would do. But it's just so interesting that like you can get really, really locked in, really granular.
Yes.
I think it's a testament to just whatever makes sense to your, whatever your neuroses may be.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I will say this, ours has definitely gotten a lot looser. There was not previously an extra list. There might be like 1 or 2, but earlier this year, I kind of handed the reins over to Joey, who's been picking up a lot of the the slack in that particular department. And between he and Amber, really, I have my opinions on stuff, but they really have figured out, like, they're really good about that whole energy kind of flow thing. Typically what happens is he'll put something out and then Amber will look through it and reorder it, and then I go in and, like, okay, well, these two have to go together because of, reasons, guitar tuning or whatever. And so between the three of us, we can really dial these in. And the sets that we've been playing recently have been, one, varied. It's not the same thing every single time, and they seem to be really good with keeping the room on our side. So,
It's good.
It's working.
That's good. What do you, one of the objections to using tracks is that it does lock you into a show pattern and, impairs your flexibility. What's your tech setup to jump around a set list during a show? How do you, walk us through that?
Yeah. So kind of the way that you were talking about, where everything's under, the show is in Band Helper.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got your set 1, you've got your set 2, you've got your extras. And so you basically have everything on a single page.
Yeah.
And, there have been times where we, like, maybe let's say set 1 goes long. And so we start kind of picking from set 2, but it doesn't require us to rejigger anything or load a different set or whatever. It's all there. And then as long as you've got data, you can go in there and you can move stuff around during breaks and make sure that it's in the right order.
And is your playback coming out of Band Helper these days?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
We've done it both ways. Ableton's great, and it's probably where we will go back to at some point. But the gigs that we're doing right now, and just the way that the setups are, a stereo playback is fine. The amount of time and effort it was taking to make sure that Ableton worked the way that it was supposed to was not worth the end result of all of that work.
Yeah, that's good. As
It
somebody
harder,
who's
more
making my
complicated.
way toward tracks, it has felt like Ableton or whatever you're going to use, that's like a whole laptop based approach, was going to take another staff member to operate. I mean,
Mhm.
it's essentially an instrument. And so I can tap the play button in Band Helper. In fact, I've learned how to build automation tracks in Band Helper that can also fire MIDI stuff. And so my, guitar rig is now ready to listen to changes as a song goes on. And I can talk to the Maestro DMX and change lighting cues as the song goes on from a prepared thing that I'm one tap away from in Band Helper on my iPad on my mic stand. So that's it makes me happy to hear that from you, that having been through very much more elaborate technical approaches, Band Helper is just kind of what you've fallen back to and it's working for you. So that's great.
Well, and to be fair though, you have made Band Helper your Ableton.
Sure.
So you've done the automation. It's really just, it's a playback engine, and
Yeah.
some people use Pro Tools, some people use Logic, some people use Ableton, some people use Band Helper. There's no right answer. It's just in my situation, just the nervousness and the uncertainty of what the Ableton rig is or isn't going to do wasn't worth the time and effort it took to make the show in Ableton.
Gotcha.
Even though I spent a lot of time
Yeah.
and resources making things work in Ableton. So, like I said, maybe one day we'll get back to it, but everything else needs to get a hell of a lot easier if that's going to happen.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Until
Well,
then.
and it leaves you the ability to dance around the set list and make adjustments on the fly, which I think is really, I don't know, for the rooms I play, that seems to be important. I can't necessarily predict in advance when a bachelorette party is going to come through the door ready to throw down.
Yeah.
Right. And when I'm going to need to jump to somewhere in my set list that's about matching their energy.
There's ways of doing that in other programs, but for the time being, Band Helper is just the thing that's there. And that's not a dig on Band Helper.
No.
It's once you set it up, it is pretty much rock solid. Like, I'll knock on my desk here, but it has not failed us, which is more there or less than I can say than Ableton.
Yeah. We really need to get Arlo on for a conversation at some point.
Hey man, I'm down to talk. What we need to do is, like, collect a bunch of questions from our listeners.
Oh,
and then do,
that's a great idea.
like, if you could ask the guy who
Like
creates
the
Band Helper
guy.
anything,
Yeah.
what would it be?
Yeah.
coverbandconfidential@gmail.com. Let's get the ball rolling on
Let's
that.
do
And
it.
we'll
Let's
reach
do
out
it.
to Arlo, see what he has
Yeah.
to say about it.
Yeah, we are a very large audience of his users.
For sure.
Be a great way to have him connect with them.
Well, and for all of my gripes, I still recommend it all the time.
Totally.
It is the thing that I tell people to
Absolutely.
get.
I run my karaoke out of it. I run all kinds of things out of it.
Shout out to Arlo.
100%.
So there doesn't seem to be any right or wrong way to do it. It's just the way that works or makes the most sense to you. And like I said, a lot of this is just going to be a product of whatever your neuroses may be.
That's right. That's right. How much control you're willing to cede to the flavor of the room at any given time.
But it is a really good idea to come up with some sort of system to allow you to be flexible. Because I mean, we joke about it that like my band doesn't take requests. We're a lot less stringent about that.
Yeah.
You know, if it makes sense and everybody's on it, the lineup is finally matured to a level where we can just pull something out of thin air and see what happens.
Yeah.
And once you get to that point, all bets are off. And that's the fun part, is that's really where you get to like ride the room,
Right.
where you're literally just calling them out of thin air, or
Yeah.
you find yourself in like a sweet spot and you know, okay, this one's going, this next one is going to murder.
Right.
That's
Right,
always a good feeling.
Right. Yeah, for me that's the joy of the whole thing is the give and take and the interplay with the energy of the room, and that's why I do the whole thing. That's,
Yeah.
So anything that locked me into, oh no, our next song is this, I wouldn't feel good about that, but that's my neurosis. So
Yeah, I mean, there's comfort in structure.
sure.
It's like we do this and we do this and we do, but it is nice to kind of throw caution to the wind.
Yeah.
But that is one of those things where you do have to be at a particular place with your lineup to do that. Because I feel like the way that this group's always been is that there's always going to be these kind of ramp up seasons. Because when you've got the same thing going for as long as we have, people come and people go, and you just kind of have to work with what you've got.
That's true.
And, you may have a sub on a date or whatever, like all those things kind of factor into what may or may not make the final list.
Yeah.
But when A Squad's on, all bets are off.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a dance.
That's great.
It's a dance.
It's fun for sure.
Cool.
So guys, that's what we do. What do you guys do? Let us know about it. Coverbandconfidential@gmail.com. What is your foolproof set layout structure? How many songs is it? How many breaks are you taking? All of that stuff. We want to know about it, but we'll see what the if there is a consensus. There may
Yeah.
not be.
How carefully timed
I'm
is each
fully-
of your songs?
Yes. I'm fully prepared to get hundreds of emails that all say the exact opposite of the one before them.
For sure.
And that's, I mean, we were talking about that last week. Do what we say or don't. Or don't not do them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But primarily don't not do them.
Yeah. We're not your dad. Do what works.
Unless my son is listening to this and I am your dad,
Which
and
case,
go to bed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's way too late
Brush
for
your
you.
teeth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. All right, man. Any other parting words?
No, I think we did it.
Awesome. Well, folks, thanks so much for tuning in, having a blast, doing all the things. We've got I think I've got 2 more weekends off, and then we've got like a double header where we got a Thursday and a Friday, and I've got another gig where I'm not on it and I'm just sending the operation out, and that's the contract should be back on that this coming week, and I feel fine about it. I think there's nothing I can do about it if I don't, but yeah.
We'll find out. But we'll talk about it next week.
If you want to support the show, you know what to do.
Yeah.
I'll go and call it for this week. In Atlanta, Georgia, I'm Adam Johnson.
In Greensboro, North Carolina, I'm Dan Ray.
You've been listening to the Coverband Confidential... Eggplant. You've been listening to the Coverband Confidential podcast for the week of September 6th, 2024.